Pass the scope. Pass the scope. Yeah. Here we go. Pass the scope. Pass the scope. When you need to amplify, share your stories on the fly. Call Pass the Scope. EDU will bring it to you. Your live event. We got you. Conference tips. We got you. Stories told. We got you. Around the globe. We got you 'cause we're Pass the Scope. Hey, pass the scope. Hey, pass the scope. Hey, pass the scope. EDU. Pass the scope. Hey, pass the scope. Hey, pass the scope. EDU coming to you live. Yeah, we're coming to you live. It is Pass the Scope EDU in partnership with the Leading Equity Center as we bring you day 3 after the bell recap of the Art of Advocacy Summit. Wow, it has been a powerful week, right, Val?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what we got for the people tonight, Valerie?
Well, the wrap up. And today's theme was the power of persistence. And I don't know about you guys, but we are at the hump and we are still trying to push through. I don't know what kind of days you guys have been having, but if it's anything indicative of the year that we've had, I know y'all have been pushing all week. Sheldon, how you looking over there?
We got to keep pushing. And oh my gosh, I still think about last week, and I mean even today, right? I was watching things today and saw Trump has gotten impeached again, first president to ever do that. And I actually watched some of the proceedings today, so I mean, because I was like, man, I wanted to know how this all works out, and it's kind of crazy. So there's a lot happening, and so I mean, to me, I hate to say that things are timely because I feel like equity work has always been around, but if having a summit just didn't line up with just everything happening, and if it wasn't so timely, I don't know what it was.
Look at God.
Yes, the divine intervention. That's it.
Yeah.
Wow. How about you, Brian? How you pushing through?
I'm tired. But I'm good and tired though. My wife's birthday was yesterday, so we celebrated all last night after the show.
Yeah.
A little bit this morning, but that's between me and my wife.
Grown folks.
Hold on, that's G-rated now.
Got my treadmill in today. It's still in the box, but I got it today. So we're working on some improvement. But you're right. The things that actually happened today was really putting things in a half circle, I like to say, because we still have a whole lot of work to do and a lot of things that we need to put in place to really digest what is really taking place in our country and what this really means in the long run. Because we know equity work is not about the short game; it's about the end game.
That's right.
And it's a journey. It's a marathon, so to speak, if you want to use that particular analogy. But it really today just showed us that we've got a lot of work to do.
That's right. And although it's day 3 of the conference and the wrap up, but just as you're saying, the work is not over.
Nope.
The summit may end, but now it's time to really go back, dig in the crates. Day 1, we talked about that planning and preparation. Day 2, it was that power of persuasion. And now day 3, that persistence. So now we really need to decide with all the information that we've been armed and equipped with, some of it new, some of it a reminder, a refresher. What are we going to do once this summit ends? Some of you have already purchased your all access pass.
Yeah.
And so there's more that you want to unpack and just spend some time with it. But what is it really going to look like? And who's going on this journey with you? Because we know it's not light work. And so it's time to round up the soldiers. We've already been meeting in the, I don't even know, I don't want to say the upper room because it almost makes it sound like you've transitioned. But at some point you've been meeting, we've been planning, these talks have been having. It's not new to a lot of us, but now it's amplified. And maybe there's some more people that are like, you know what? I've ignored this, but I hear you, I see you, and I recognize I need to get some stuff done. So once this wraps up, guys, let's put in the work, push through. So Sheldon, tell us how we get how did you get to day 3? This topic, this theme, what should we expect? What are we going to unpack tonight?
So for tonight, as always throughout this week, this whole the three process. I was doing a lot of research on advocacy. I mean, that's what we do here at the center, and I came across something that talked about the preparation, persistence, persuasion, and that really resonated with me. One of the things that I get a lot is how do I engage in these conversations with my colleagues, my peers, when it comes to the changes that need to happen? I don't know what to say. And so I started looking into persuasion first. But then I was like, you can't just learn how to persuade if you don't prepare first. You don't just walk into a conversation not ready, right? And then the last part is you're not going to always hit them the first time and then it works out. It's great if it does, then you're really persuasive. But then sometimes we have to persevere. And so putting those things all together. So I'm really wanted this to be a process that folks could really understand. And so I'm really happy about today where we're bringing on several of our presenters for today. We have like all-star cast every night this week. I really want to make sure it's an all-star cast. And so I'm really looking forward to bring on the folks that are here with us so they can share everything. The summit is still happening. You got until 7 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning. So you still have time to register and catch day 3. Always, of course, you can get the all access pass if you want to hold on to the content forever. But it's still going on, still registration. So I hope folks will, if you haven't signed up already, that you'll join in.
All right. Well, let's not wait. Let's go ahead and get this party started and bring on those powerful presenters from today. Here we go. Boom. I need to put in some drop-in music.
You need some sound effects. Every time it's boom, boom.
Hey, good evening, everybody. How y'all doing?
Hello.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, don't be shy. We'll give y'all a chance to introduce yourself, starting right now below me. We're starting with David. And David, here's the rules. We've done this all 4 nights now. So here are the rules. Once you introduce yourself, tell a little bit about yourself, you pass the scope to the next person. Don't mute your mic in a hurry. Go ahead and pass the scope to the next person. Cool?
All right. That's too easy.
All
right. So I am David Adams, Senior Director of Strategy at the Urban Assembly. I'm also on the board of directors of Castle's Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, and I've put in 18 years in the U.S. Army Reserve, currently a civil affairs officer. A wife, Tamika Adams, father of 2 children, Elijah and Isaiah, and really happy to be here tonight. Given the instructions that I received, I will follow them. I'm going to pass the mic over to Dr. Mejia. I'm sorry if I didn't get that correct, but I know you'll correct me if I didn't.
You did it, David, you did. Buenas noches, everyone. Good evening. My name is Doctora Mejia. I am currently an assistant principal or a dean at EQ2 in Los Angeles, proudly serving the Pico Union community, which is filled with a large population of immigrant families and just a community filled with a lot of direct need. This is my 10th year in education, and I proudly sit here tonight because I'm sitting in front of the camera, just sharing with you a little bit about my expertise and background that I picked up. I am currently with Unidos Us, serving as an advocate for English language learners on our state, for the state of California, trying to advocate to make sure that as we move forward or experience any other emergencies as they present themselves, that our most vulnerable students are protected, and making sure that all kids have access to education during these times. And looking forward to share with you a little bit more about who I am and what I have just gained over the years. And so I'll pass it on to Aisha Taylor.
Thank you. My name is Aisha Taylor. My last position was a principal. I am currently a professor at Houston Community College. I've been in education for 13 years. I have now begun my exit ticket with starting my own business and consulting as an author, educator, and speaker. And I am known as the confidence coach. And I teach leaders and teachers confidence boosting strategies that position them to make a more significant impact both in and out the classroom. So I'm looking forward to this panel. I have enjoyed the conference, and it played a very significant role in it. And the titles touched on me quite a bit because of some things that I've gone through. the last couple of years in education. So I can't wait for us to get into this conversation. I am going to pass it over to Mr. Simpson.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Simpson. I always like to start with, I'm a kid from Flint, Michigan. That's home, born and raised. Currently based in Dallas, Texas. Lived abroad for over a decade in Laos, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. Been in education for over 22 years. 4 years ago, I had a colleague that was disrespected, and out of that led to creating an affinity group for International Educators and Leaders of Color, now called ALOC, or the Association of International Educators and Leaders of Color, where we focus on research, learning, and advocacy. So a pleasure to connect everyone. Looking forward, and I'm passing it over to my colleague Homa, and I hope I don't say it incorrectly, but correct me if I do. Tavangar.
That's very good. Thanks, Kevin. It's nice to see you. What a surprise.
You too.
Not a surprise, because I knew you were in the program and I was really excited about that. So hi, everybody. I'm Homa Tavangar. I have an Iranian name and I've lived all over the world. And I started out working in doing a lot of work around global citizenship, global competence, and more, my work is all around uniting these crucial areas of how a global citizen must really see themselves as one, and so that issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice are really centered in that building of a global identity, and that every child really deserves the world. And so it has really been an honor to get to kind of look at and work on these bigger issues. My path crosses a little bit with Kevin, with international educators, and I'm the co-founder of an organization called the Oneness Lab. We're online at onennesslab.com, and we get to do a lot with educators in particular, helping them go deeper than diversity. Diversity is just the starting point. And so that is one of the great honors and joys that I have. And kind of like Aisha, I'm a bit of an entrepreneur in this space, and I'm also an author.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. Let me address the audience real quick. We are live on several channels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tonight. 7 channels. So as you are watching, don't hesitate to participate. We welcome your questions. We welcome your comments, as long as they're appropriate. But we want you to be a part of the conversation as well. We want to be as interactive as possible. So don't hesitate at all. And we'll try to comment back as well, because we'll post it on the show as we go. So, Sheldon, what's up, man?
Yeah, I do want to say also, David and Homa have both been on the show. So I don't remember which number David was on and Homa. Sorry, I just too many. But
I should have led off with that in terms of my accomplishments, Sheldon. You have to excuse me next time. I'll get it in the right order. You know, father, husband, but really, I had an opportunity to talk about social emotional learning and equity on the Leading Equity podcast. So now I know I'll get it right in the future.
Yeah,
David, you kill me. Okay.
You can't bury the lead.
Okay. I love it. Yeah, but you could go through, I'll look for them so I can give you the numbers so that we'll know. But both of them have been on the show, and I definitely want to get some of the 3 that haven't been on the show yet. We're gonna have to set something up so we can get you on as well. So what we've been doing this week is basically sharing what your session, the title of your session, what it was about, kind of like an abstract, and then what was a takeaway. What did you want? Like, if I watch your session, what am I going to take away that I could implement maybe the next day or something like that? So we'll go around the room and we'll share, and then we'll kind of discuss a little bit about each other's sessions and provide some of our thoughts. And of course, we love to get some audience feedback as well. So let's start with Aisha. Why don't you share with us the title of your session,
Sure.
a little abstract, and what was the takeaway?
the title of my session was called The Power of Persistence and Resilience. And the takeaway from that, and what you will get into when you get into my session, is just the power that we have as educators. And I don't think that we really realize that. I'll just tell you why this title, The Art of Advocacy, and this title, The Power of Persistence and Resilience, resonates with me, is because it started about a couple of years ago, where I was forced out of my position as an assistant principal on a campus for 10 years due to speaking out about the lack of equity and resource. And so I've been on this journey ever since that. And so from there, it started with me writing a book entitled Faith, Fear, Resilience, How to Reclaim Your Educational Life. So you see, resilience has already been a part of my research. And that's where I learned the power of confidence and resilience when it comes to not just in my life, but in the educational realm. Unfortunately, I've seen the ugly side of it, where you're on a campus and the demographics, those students are zoned in certain demographics to that campus, but they're not given the resources, or the staff is not given what they need in order to keep the campus safe. And then I've been on another campus that was charter, where they are given this money, but the students are lacking so much. And it's like, well, where does this equity stop? Where do we end? And I think it's time for educational reform. And so in my presentation, I speak about why it's important for teachers to cultivate persistence and resilience. And then I also talk about the 5 C's that I've learned over just research and coaching, which is one of my favorite things to do in my job, coaching leaders and teachers on the 5 C's that empower you to be confident and increase scholar academics.
I love it. And thank you for sharing your story. And I'm glad that you started off with, like, this was personal to me, because I was one of the ones that was vocal, and I ended up, having to find other employment. And I want to throw this out to the group, because I get this question a lot. Folks send me emails all the time. I do not want, I'm afraid that I might lose my job if I speak up or speak out. What type of advice, and I'm going to throw this out to the whole group, anybody that wants to answer, but what type of advice would you give to someone that is looking to speak up, but they're afraid? What would you first tell someone like that?
I guess I'll start off, since I'm on first, but I would just simply tell them, first, realize how powerful your voice is, but also know going into education is just like, going into a corporation. Make sure that you have, those education advocacies on your side. Make sure you are with a union. Make sure you have an attorney. And I think that's where a lot of us as educators go wrong. We don't know and realize what we have. I'm also a paralegal as well, my background. And so when you begin to learn that education code and learn what should be happening, and you question some of those things, you have to be very careful when you're going into that realm, because unfortunately that can be your backlash. But if you have people there to protect you, it could end up in your benefit.
Yeah, Sheldon, I'll take on that. Just to add on what Aisha was saying, I think one of the most important things is to really focus on persuasion. Now, I know that that's one of the powers that we talked about today: power is persistence, power of persuasion, right? But at the end of the day, you want people to adopt the stance that you believe in, right? And so how do you make your stance help people see how your stance is in line with the things that you want them to do? So one thing to talk about is making people believe that your idea is their idea, right? Understanding where they're coming from, understanding what their priorities are, what their perspectives are, and then getting your ideas to match with those things so that you get what you need, and you're also able to move the organization forward. So my experience has been persuasion matters, knowing what people care about matters, and building relationships that move that conversation forward.
I would like to share next. I appreciate both what Aisha and David have shared. Aisha, I wish I would have known you a few years ago, because I actually had to pay $10,000 to break a contract so that I can leave the school that I was working at during that time. And people ask me, I've gotten this question throughout my career, like, what do you do when you're no longer in alignment with what you're seeing on the day-to-day, right? Like, there's always theory, and then you see the day-to-day practice from your colleagues, from your administrators. And my answer is always, you have to know what your core values are, and you have to align yourself with those every day, right? Your decision-making should be centered to whatever it is that you value as a person, as an educator. And for me, when I realized that I was no longer in alignment, I had to sit down and have the conversation with the CEO about, like, what is it going to take for me to be able to break out of my contract? And that came with a $10,000 tag price. And I look back on that decision and I'm like, I don't regret it, because I knew that as much as David just shared, like, the building of the rapport, the advocating, like, we just weren't in alignment. We weren't where we needed to be. We weren't serving the children, like the children that I value the most, children who look like me, who look like you here. And we weren't there yet. And I know that it takes sometimes more than one person. You can't be the only faculty of color trying to lead that charge in a predominantly white community, right? And so sometimes you just got to be okay with that and just align yourselves and know that at the end of the day, like, doesn't mean that you leave education altogether. You just got to keep on finding where you do fit in and where you start to, like, just, for me, it's just all about alignment. So I'll share that.
Trying to find the unmute button. Okay. Anybody else had any thoughts about that I would like to add? Okay. Let's call on Kevin. Kevin, share with us your session, again, your topic, your takeaway, and a little bit about it.
All right, I'll hop in here. So I had the opportunity to bring on another colleague, Marla Hunter. She was one of a few who set up an organization, another affinity group for international educators, specifically Black educators, called Brothers and Sisters in International Schools. So what her and I wanted to do was just to sit down and have a no script, no slide conversation dealing with persisting as international educators and leaders of color, where we reflected on our time abroad. We both have matriculated back to the U.S. at this time, but we're still serving sort of globally in our work. And so her and I, we just sit down and it just went back and forth and reflected on our experiences, positive and negative, reflected on our interactions with different people around the world, different organizations. And just during that time, we just, got to that point where we, looked at and thought about, what worked, what wasn't working, those times when we've been silenced, when we sort of spoke up and put our voice out there, or we asked questions, or we challenged systems or individuals, and were met with walls. And I think that was one of the things that came out of just sitting down and having that conversation, was the need to be persistent, but also to persevere. And so that sort of came out as we reflected and refined. And we also talked about that need to make sure that you find others who are doing that work, because at times it can feel lonely. You can feel like you're the only one, or is it just me who's calling in and calling out organizations? How comfortable am I? How can I find support systems? How am I taking care of myself in the midst of all of the work? And our biggest takeaway, I think, at the end was that advocacy at times can be messy. Don't expect quick wins, quick fixes all the time. Don't expect answers. Expect silence. Expect, at times you might be silenced. And so I think we just went down that road of reflection, but in the midst of it, we knew that it's a necessity, that if we didn't speak up, if we didn't start these affinity groups, if we didn't find others who were in places around the world where they were the only one and they wanted to engage in conversation, they wanted their voice to be a part of a place or a system where it wasn't being listened to. And so I think that's sort of where we left off. And that was our biggest takeaway, is that the work will continue. It will persist. It's not short term, especially when we're looking at things. We're coming up on, we have a session that's coming Saturday on looking at the ecosystem in international schools. And then how do we, how do we get rid of racism and discrimination that we so often encounter and see? And again, it's putting voice out there. And I think that's our biggest thing, is making sure that, as we have went around the world, worked in different spaces and places, been the only one, been looked at, been questioned, been when people wonder, how did you get here? Who do you know? Persisting and persevering throughout, and then bringing others along. I think that was our biggest thing too, is how do we make others aware of opportunities that are out there globally?
Which was actually going to be my question. How do we do that? Because I mean, I know you've traveled and somehow you are able to connect and I mean, what is, I want folks to watch the session. So is there a teaser, if you will, or a way that you can respond on how we, like, what could we do to, like, if I'm in a place like I moved to Idaho, I didn't know anybody. I had to find out where to get my hair cut, those kind of things, like those little stuff that I didn't necessarily think about. So what would you say are some of the, some strategies in which, you come to an area where you're not as familiar, and how do you get tapped in?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. What we do is we find is people will, in a lot of our groups, they'll pose and they'll ask questions like, who's been here, either traveling or who's lived here. And then that's how conversations will spark. People will ping people. People will say, oh, you're going to Laos, or you're going to Qatar, you're going to these different places around the world. I know such and such. So a lot of it just works very just natural. In a lot of our groups, we'll see that, or who's applied here, who's worked here, or does this school have a stance on anti-racism, diversity, equity, inclusion? That'll happen a lot of times in their groups, or I'm working on this research. So what we're finding is people are so just open to bring in other people and to share those opportunities, which is a big piece of what we start to do too. When we see conferences, when we see panels that don't reflect the world, we use the language of those organizations and go to them and say, hey, have you thought about, have you looked at, have you considered? So I think for us, it is this constant building up and finding others who are around the world, all corners, and letting them know that we're here, we're out here in the world doing this work. Because we see so many people are saying, I went to the website, and no one looked like me. So should I apply here? Is this even something for me? But for us, it is that whole making sure that, if you want to do something, you'll find a way, and I think for me, it's because when I started, when I first learned about international education, which was 21 years ago, it was from someone who looked like me, who said, I'm going back to London at the end of the summer. And that was my first encounter. And I'm like, we need to talk, and that's where my whole journey and my learning began. And my mentee said years ago, I'm going to Sudan. And again, I'm like, how do you do? So that's sort of where it started. I had people who looked like me, and that was, a source of inspiration. It's like, okay, they can do it, I can do it, and so when I see people who are like, hey, I'm interested in international schools, and here they're like, or such and such, I'm like, let them know that these groups, our groups exist. We're out here, we're a reference, we're a resource. We're giving information away for free. I talked to people, I've had 3 conversations this week with people who are interested in working overseas in some capacity, and so I think that's our thing, is constantly giving and sharing our stories, and just sharing the work.
Can I chime in? I want to, in terms of international, first, I just want to say, Kevin and his group, Kevin and ALOC, they have done an amazing job in raising awareness. Like, I don't know how many years old the organization is, but it has really made a very significant impact in what is a relatively short time. I also would add, if there are educators of color who want to do international teaching, I would say a few things to that. One is, be warned and go in with your eyes wide open, because racism, colorism, colonialism are alive and well in these usually very elite environments. And I think there sometimes is the idealism of just get me out of the United States. And the reality is the world is in a state of transition, reckoning, and young people are noticing and they're calling into account in many of the international schools. But it's like you can run, but you cannot hide. And that's like a sad reality. I wish I could say that's not the case, but it is very much alive. And in some cases, the conversation is years behind where it is in some US schools. So kind of like just to know that, but then but on the other hand, don't deprive yourself of that opportunity. If you dreamed of going to Bangkok or London, or like insert location you've always wished you could go in the world, or Idaho, Sheldon. To me, that's like another country. So I think don't give that away either. You know, everybody deserves the world. So one thing I kind of feel like I love the principle of accompaniment and the principle of collaboration. And so maybe you have a friend or someone else who is also a teacher of color or an advocate for you who might be also interested in making that leap. Because I do think going and being like the one, and many of us have always been the one in our environments. I think it's can be even harder in that international school. So I think if there is a way to like make sure there is someone joins you to the recruitment fair, or you know, something like that, or I mean maybe you have a partner, but it is hard to be the one. And like China, for example, a lot of hiring of American teachers, that's a hard place to be the one, you know. So I would sort of just add that, because it's a whole interesting world, right? It's an interesting topic in and of itself.
Looks like Popsy's joined us. I want to give her a chance to introduce yourself. And I know that you have Popsy.
I would sort of just add that.
So, Popsy, did you want to introduce yourself? And I know you've kind of traveled around as well. You have an interesting story that we've talked about before in regards to kind of like your upbringing and kind of what we've been talking about. Maybe you might want to share a little bit of that.
Thanks. And my apologies for being late. I had to upgrade everything so I could get into StreamYard, which was new to me, but I'm here. So, yes. Popsy Kanagaratnam, and I'm currently a graduate student, and I'm also working with Sheldon, the Leading Equity Center. And wow, international schools. I was born in Singapore and went to school in Singapore. So although it was a fairly diverse population, because it was a British colony, there were still standards and expectations and colonialism, which when you're living in the middle of it, you don't recognize it because you're there. And it's everywhere around you. And then in later life, and then we moved here. And once again, coming here, I came here and went right into 8th grade after 10 days in the country. So again, there was a lot that I didn't recognize that was going on around me. And my sister lives in China, in Shanghai, and both her kids went to international schools in Shanghai. And so I have seen firsthand pretty much being the only or one of the few in a lot of different situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a lot. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad you were able to join Popsy. So thank you so much. Let's move to let's go with David. David, why don't you share about your session? You know, go ahead and give us a rundown.
Hey, Sheldon, thank you for that opportunity. I appreciate it. So did a session on the power of persistence. And we focused on the rose that grew from concrete, which is a poem from Tupac Shakur. The session focused on 3 ideas that are grounded in the ability to persist in what we want to accomplish in our lives. The first is the importance of setting goals, and not just kind of any old goal, but setting high quality goals. So we talked about if this happens, what am I going to do? Goals that we can achieve, goals that motivate us. So from there, we moved on to maintaining optimism, right? So we know that persistence is about believing that you can get stuff done. Maintaining a growth mindset is going to be a really important aspect of what it means to be persistent. So first, you got to know what you're trying to persist at. All right, we don't persist if we don't know what it is that we're trying to do. Then we got to believe in our ability to accomplish that. And then lastly, we got to surround ourselves with supportive relationships. That means friends, family, clergymen, church, civic organizations, Boys and Girls Club, basketball teams. You know, Sheldon, I'll be hitting the basketball court every now and then. So these are the things that we need to be persistent. And in that session, you're going to learn about some of the science behind persistence. We're going to use Tupac Shakur poem as a way to kind of ground us in how a rose that grew from concrete demonstrated persistence in the context of his life. You're going to walk away with some strategies for applying that to your own life in the context of advocacy.
Love it, love it, love it. So can you quote a few bars for us, or am I putting you on the spot?
From Tupac?
Yeah.
Did you know about the rose that grew from concrete? Without having feet, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping it dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Did you hear about the rose that grew from concrete when no one else even cared? And let me just say, I spit that off the top of my head. All right, there was no crib sheets here, because I knew you're going to ask me that question. So I spent last night kind of making sure I had all the inflections down. So.
All right, y'all know me and David go back. So him and I have worked on projects together. So yeah, that's my guy. So we joke around. Okay, so I guess the next question I have: what made you kind of tie the Tupac and your session? Like, how did you link them together?
Yeah. So what I love so much about that poem, when I was working directly in schools, right now as a senior director of strategy, I support adults who support young people. But I was working directly in schools. That poem really spoke to our kids, to our young people. I spent 5 years working in special education district, supporting students classified with emotional disturbance. And this notion that I really appreciate is this rose that grows from this place that has no nutrients, has no sustenance, has no dirt, no food, right? But this one rose decided, and it's not roses, you think they're fragile, but they're pretty hardy flowers, right? This one rose decided, I'm not gonna let this be what defines me. And Tupac writes about this rose, right? And he says, funny how it grew learned how to walk without having feet, right? By keeping its dreams, I grew from concrete when no one else cared. And so for me, we can't control a lot of things in our lives. We have incredible people who every single day advocate for the bettering of our society, for the advancement of our country. And we benefit from those people. And so even though we can't control a lot of things, right? We can't control where we're born. We can't control our parents. We can't control the schools we go to. I take a lot of strength from that poem, right? And of this belief that from that concrete, from this place, I imagine the roots seeking out the water. It's not like somebody came and poured it every day and, talked to it and make sure it was growing. No, it pushed roots down into the ground and it found the nutrients it needs. So when I think about persistence, right, I think about pushing out, being proactive, not waiting for people to help me grow, but finding the nutrients that I need to be successful so that I can be like that rose from concrete.
Amen. You better preach, man. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Homa, let's move to Homa. Why don't you share the rundown of your session?
Okay. So, well, it's hard to follow, David. That was really beautiful. I love a good metaphor. There is like a good metaphor is a great thing to build off of. Actually, I think a little bit, some of my theme kind of really does follow from yours, because I think, so what I called my talk is disrupting bias with good friction. And the idea is sort of kind of, some of it is the power of metacognition. Maybe I should read that description. But basically, there are ways that we can disrupt bias and sort of reactive behaviors. And bias is basically a reactive behavior in many ways, as well as Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt, who's somebody that I quote in the talk and use her book Biased. She's a Stanford professor, a MacArthur Genius winner, an amazing thinker around bias. She basically talks about how implicit bias is both a distorting lens in our brains, in the architecture of our brains, and a reflection of the disparities in society. So understanding that, understanding the metacognition of what is happening in our brains and how we react to certain bias situations can help us interrupt that. And so one of the things I start with is sharing a model that we developed in the Oneness Lab, which is a heat index of terms. And so an initial stage in recognizing how to disrupt bias is recognizing the power of words, the power that words have on us. And so, for example, if you're in a predominantly white institution or space and terms like white supremacy, white fragility, white privilege come up, people might, you may feel the heat in the room rise. People get uncomfortable. And so what do you do with that? So for those people who get uncomfortable, recognizing the heat is rising in the room, staying in the room, listening when it's hard, and clarifying. So it's sort of a methodology. Look at that. A methodology that I share. And it really starts with this metacognition of, I'm not going to run away when the conversation gets hard, and I'm going to recognize what's happening. And then the next level of sort of this metacognition is understanding how we might be able to slow down and disrupt systems of bias. And I share the example that Dr. Eberhardt worked on with the Nextdoor app, which many people might use that app in their neighborhoods. It's intended to be used to say, I need a contractor, or I lost my dog. Has anyone seen my dog? But what was really happening was people have been using Nextdoor as a racial profiling app. And the experience of Dr. Eberhardt was to come in and show the Nextdoor creators, and this is an example of where intent and impact, there's a gap. Intent may have been good. Their intention around the app was good, but the impact caused a great deal of trauma and hurt. And so they went to rectify that. And basically, she showed them how you can introduce a few questions into the algorithm to slow down and disrupt the bias that people were sort of naturally gravitating to. And when they did that, so for example, they added a question, why, in the app. When you want to report someone based on race, you have to include a few additional factors. And then when you ask why, they basically give you a little education on your own bias. And simply by doing those small interventions, it created a 75% reduction in the instance of racial profiling on the Nextdoor app. And so I think that is an example and sort of an inspiration for ways that we may take stock in our schools, in our classrooms, for where bias is living and where it's growing and perpetuating, and how we might interrupt that. So it starts with our own metacognition of what is happening in our own minds, because we do all have bias, but then that's not the whole story. The rest of the story is that we have the capability to interrupt it. And so when we know that, we can do something about it. And when we see examples that really made a difference, that were not that hard, but require some will, then we can really disrupt bias in our own environments too.
I love that. I love that, and I didn't know about that research, but I'm gonna have to look that up because just the whole. Sometimes when I find research, I'm like, what made them research that? Like, what drew them to that? Like the whole idea of the Nextdoor app. I'm assuming maybe that individual, I forgot the professor's name, but maybe they were using the app and they're like, you know what, this is kind of biased, and maybe that drew them to wanting to do more research on it. It's crazy how there's a lot of people that I interact with that don't think that bias is a thing, or they don't think that they're biased. They say things like, well, I treat all my kids the same. I don't have bias. You know, everybody comes in with a clean slate in my classroom, kind of thing. How do we respond to that? What's the response when you get those kind of answers? I mean, I'm sure everyone on here has probably experienced something like that. What is something that you normally say? And anybody can jump in on that.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in on something earlier.
Oh, okay.
About Jennifer Eberhardt, because in the book she talks about the day before she graduated from Harvard and how she was stopped by the cops and how they put her in jail overnight. And she called, was it the dean, I think, to come get her. And when she went before the judge basically dismissed the whole thing because clearly there was bias involved and said, you're free to go, Dr. Eberhardt. And she said it was the first time that she'd been called Dr. Eberhardt. And then on the Nextdoor app, which I really appreciated, what she did was ask specific questions. So if they said, well, he looked suspicious, then it was what about him was suspicious, or what was suspicious about the behavior. And what she found was when he started interrupting with those questions and making them describe the specific behavior, then they realized that maybe it was just a normal event and not nearly as suspicious as they thought.
And following up on that briefly, Sheldon, they just passed a law in New Jersey around 911 calls based solely on race, and they use a similar strategy, right? So it's not a question of what's the person look like, it's what is the person doing. So what is the person doing that is suspicious? And again, to what Popsy is doing, that helps people confront what it is that they're actually queuing in on, right? And that's just important. So just following up on that, it's about intervening and creating strategies that stop the heuristics in our brain from making and leaping to the decisions that we've been taught to leap to. So just wanted to agree with Popsy and thinking about how those strategies help us be more effective at seeing reality.
So I want to kind of jump in on with Dr. Sheldon posing that question of what do we do when people say, or teachers say, I treat everybody the same in my classroom. I treat all my kids the same. You should be treating all your kids fair, but you shouldn't be treating them the same because everyone is different. And so I think that we are moving in education into this realm of, instead of just like you have IEPs, we have ILPs, individual learning plans for students, because we have to cater to their really cater, because we've been saying that forever in education, right? Really cater to their individual learning styles and their needs. And that goes back to learning their profile, learning who your audience is. I mean, it's a plethora of things, but we can't treat them all the same, just like you can't treat every teacher the same. So we really have to break out of that shell and really explain what that means, especially to our newcomers coming into education.
I think it's also removing this veil that
you're muted.
Oh, how about now?
Muted. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I think it's there's also, going back to Sheldon's question about, I treat everyone the same. Well, we have this benefit of science that has done all this neurological research that teaches us that actually we don't. And so the fact that you have bias and I have bias and everyone in this room has bias, it doesn't make you that does not make you a bad person. It's recognizing what do you do with it. So our brain registers bias, and I shared this in the talk, our brain registers bias within 200ths of a millisecond. It just is. But the power is what happens at 0.201 of a millisecond and beyond. And that's where the metacognition comes in. That ability to disrupt bias is within each of us. So you're not a bad person if you see that we all have bias. It's fine. You have it. I have it. What are we going to do now? What do we do with it? So I feel like that's sort of a way to help people kind of overcome that hump. And I found that to be very valuable in conversations where people get really defensive.
Absolutely. Thank you, Homa, for that. So I believe Popsy, I don't think you yet got a chance to introduce your session. So as Homa's talking about the bias, I believe that you talked about the teacher's lounge and some of the bias and situations that can happen there. And then you spoke about a story. So I'll let you kind of explain what do the viewers need to know about your session? What would they take away, and what would you like to highlight?
A couple of things, but something just jumped right out at me, and it was my first year teaching. I was a brand new teacher, and I remember this parking lot conversation where the special education resource teacher said, speaking of a student, well, I don't care if he's pink or purple or green, I don't see color, and it's his behavior. And I think I had been at the school for maybe a month, newly certified, newly minted teacher with a degree, and I'm standing there going, but, well, a few years later, I worked with that same student, and as it turns out, he was a student with emotional disturbance, but he was highly intelligent and responded to all sorts of cues. And I had the same special ed woman come up to me afterwards and say, well, he always behaves when he's with you, which kind of backs into my topic for today, which was as a teacher who came to this country when I was older, I was not familiar with a lot of things that went on in schools. And so my first exposure to the school system was as a teacher. And what I found was particularly teachers who'd been teaching for a long time tended to be very, very firm and strong in their opinions and unwilling to yield. And so I'd walk in and I'd hear something like, oh, well, you're not going to get anything out of him. He's really got low intelligence. And I started realizing that with a little time and effort and attention, the students would respond. And I had a couple of different examples of students who were basically written off by other teachers and who within 6 months or a couple of years were doing just as well as their peers. But the challenge that I had was convincing the other teachers that this was something that was manageable, that they could do. And so when they saw the results of tests, because that's what we use to judge our students, they would turn around and say, well, they worked for you. And no, it's not like I had something special. It's not like I knew something that they didn't. I actually looked at the kid and saw what they needed and tried to work with what they had, build on what their strengths were, and show them. And then they did the rest. And the students were the ones who did all the work.
And I'm so glad that you did share that, Popsy, because a lot of times, and it's a sad truth, because as educators, when we come into the profession, you make the assumption that everyone is coming into this profession because we want to all do what's best for kids. If we all look back at why we got into education, it was probably an educator that we had that inspired us, someone that said, I see this in you, even when we may not have believed it for ourselves. But then you come into a building and then you have the naysayers and the negative Nancy's that, oh, why are you spending so much time on that kid or those kids? Or, they can't read, and don't even waste your time. And it makes you wonder, how did you get to that point? Where was that turning point? Because there's no way you signed up for education with that. So how do you then, as you did, move on? And anybody can jump in on this question. How do you block them out and then say, you know what, I'm going to continue. I'm going to persist. I am going to pursue these children so that I can bring out the best of them. How do you do that in the midst of everyone around you not having that belief?
So what I did was I backed out because I was hitting burnout, and it was very clear that I was hitting burnout by being in that environment. And so I left and ended up working in higher ed, but I also ended up working on a couple of grant-funded projects to do teacher training. And that, and also being an adjunct at George Washington University. So the combination of doing some teacher training and being an adjunct helped me approach it from a different perspective.
Anybody else have thoughts?
I think it's us remembering our why, staying focused on our why. And frankly, I used to tell teachers that are focused, stay out of the teacher's lounge for that reason. Because I know I have walked in, being in leadership, and you walk in on conversations and I just get what I need to get and get out for that reason and for that purpose alone. But stay focused on your why. Remember your education philosophy, which mine is do what's best for kids. And if you stay true to that, stay true to the profession while you are in it, I think that you'll be able to manage and keep that balance, like you said. So it's all about surrounding yourself. And I think Mr. Adams spoke about this, surrounding yourself with the right people, collaborate with the right people, and those people that's going to keep you on the right track. We need that accountability.
And I think it was stated earlier, I think Dr. Mejia talked about too, that alignment piece. Sometimes, as time persists, it might be leadership change, the school may change, the teachers may change, and it may, the season may have passed, and I know I've been in places before where leadership changed and there was a misalignment. So, I have a choice to make. Do I stay or do I turn in this, this letter saying that it has been to serve here, but I'm going to move on, and I think it's, once you know that, or the vision changes of the school, someone comes and says, now we want a STEM focused school when it might've been, literacy and arts focused. And I think it's us as educators, and like it was just said by Aisha, doing what's in the best interest of kids, and I think I know I've been in a situation before where I had to, a teacher may have said something like my low kids, and I will speak that back to them because I'm a big believer in language matters, and it's like what we say has power. And so, and that goes back to my Sunday school teacher. I need to call her today. That's why I have my red on, and one of my favorite colors was the Delta. So language matters. I'm big on that. And so I spoke that back to the teacher. I said, I'm going to say back what I just heard you say. You said my low kids, and let's just talk about that. What does that mean? Who are you talking about when you say my low kids? And then I threw it back into her and I said, would you, because her daughter went to the school, would you want a teacher or someone else in this building to say my low kids and then insert your daughter's name? And again, we really have to think about that. Language matters. It is powerful. What we say, what we don't say, it matters.
Yeah, in that as well, making it personal matters. I used to do a talk about the walk to the cum folders. When I'm showing my age a little bit, when I began teaching years back, when you got your student list, they'll give you the stack of the cum folders so you can actually do some research prior to, the first day of school. And I remember the lead teacher taking me back in that dark room. I remember everything about the walk down that hallway. And as we were going through the files, she would say, "Oh, you got that kid. Oh, and you got that kid." And what that prompted me to do was, one, I began to speak on how to learn to love even that kid. To decompress, your biases towards what that kid is anyway. Because that kid could be any kid. That just shows you what it is that you don't like as an educator, and in your ways of trying to create what I call Stepford kids. Now, what helped me is I was a father as well. And I had that kid, so to speak. So what I began to do was I began to model for those teachers. And as I am modeling for the teacher, I'm explaining this is how you can address certain issues, not just keep it in my own classroom. I think sharing is a key in all of this, because it can be exhausting. It makes you, want to back out. It does create, burnout situations or even demoralization. But if you take the time as you are learning to address those particular issues and share out ways that you can actually be better because of them, I think that also helps in the process.
Those kids.
My kids.
Oh, I want to quickly agree with Brian. First, I want to congratulate you to the trade to the Nets, Brian. Congratulations on that move from Houston. Secondly, I just want to talk about this notion of efficacy, right? Obviously, you talked about this. Like, how do we create a sense of efficacy in our kids, right? That's not about giving them the answer. That's not about being dumb. That's not about being smart. That's about looking at your strengths and challenges and having experiences and scaffolds that allow you to struggle through a difficult situation and be successful. So much of teaching is about building that situation, those experiences in the right order for kids so that they're like, I could do this, right? There's this idea that being a good teacher is about taking the brightest kid, putting them in your classroom, then patting yourself on the back, right, for things that didn't have anything to do with you. A true teacher, like a true professional, prides themselves in taking the most challenging kid and saying, I made an impact on the way that kid understands his self and the subject because of the strategies that I use. So I just want to really kind of resonate with what you said there. It is about efficacy, and that's so much about how we structure learning experiences so that a student says, I got this. You know what? I asked you before. This time I got it. I'm going to answer this question on myself. So I just wanted to really resonate with that.
Ooh, David, you may have just shot somebody's ego because look, nothing against AP teachers, nothing against them, but
I got something. I have some. So I wouldn't go that far, Valerie. I have some against it.
Listen, they take sometimes a little bit too much credit. I'm like, a lot of those kids, they are self-motivated and they are doing the work. It's not really any effectiveness that you truly had on them. So then when it's time to sign kids up registration on an annual basis, and you're looking at me sideways, well, I don't want to work with the CP kids. They don't want to work with you. And the kids that you are working with, you actually have no real impact on them. I'm sorry to bust your bubble, but those scores are because those kids have been doing well all along. You could show up not a day and they would still score probably in the same range. So if we really want to see how effective you are, you're right. Let's take you down to the kids that we have put in the special ed classrooms and see how much growth and results you can get in one school year's time. And then we can talk about the credentials you think you deserve.
Hey, I'm not going to beat a dead horse on this, Valerie, right? But coming out of the special education population myself, the most important insights into learning have come out of special education, because the only way to understand something is to see when folks are struggling with it and work with them, right? Michael Jordan was a terrible coach. Man was naturally gifted, could jump to the moon. Steve Kerr, right? He's got something to offer his guys because he can offer what it means to actually struggle. So gifted education has not produced any kind of supports or insights into what it means to be an educated person or to help struggling learners because they don't care about it. Special education has been the field that has put themselves in that space. and I am a special educator by training, and I care about the work that everyone does to take a student who is struggling and then put them on the path to success. So I just want to one more time shout out Popsy for her story and reiterate why I think special education is a place to be.
David, I'm going to go a step further and say, when you talk about student efficacy, it starts with teacher efficacy, because how you feel when you're standing in front of that classroom about your skills and your capabilities, that trickles down to students, right? And there's 4 sources: your vicarious experiences, your master experience. Oh, yes, yes, all of that goes into that. So unless research already shows that a high efficacy teacher is more likely to reach low performing students. Matter of fact, I teach a course on that's the secret to reaching low performing scholars, right? From your high efficacy that you have. And that goes back to learning those relationships, putting more tools in your tool belt to be able to reach those low kids or difficult so-called kids. So it's a reason why little Johnny don't act up in Miss Taylor class, but he act a fool in, Miss Coleman class, because that teacher has taken the time in order to do that. So it starts with teacher efficacy as opposed to starting with the student efficacy. With low teacher efficacy, it already shows that those teachers are less likely to use a variety of skills to even reach those students.
All right. I'm sure we could keep going on this. But we do want, I do want to make sure that Dr. Mejia has an opportunity to share a little bit about our session. So why don't you share with us about, give us a rundown of your session.
Sure. First off, I just want to say thank you to everyone for everything that's been said. I've just been nodding my head in agreement because y'all are speaking truth to power, right? There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of cultivating growth mindsets, asset-based thinking in educators across the nation, and I would argue across the world. So super excited to be in this space and to be able to share a little bit about my session. So my session was called The Power of Persistence, Endure Challenges as They May Rise. And it was really focused on cultivating emotional resilience as an opportunity to continue the work that we do every single day. And so I was going to say that this session was inspired because of us going into a pandemic, right? On March 12th, I still recall the day where we were all called in and being told that this is going to be like, we're shutting down. And I remember that feeling and anxiety of like, what do you mean we're shutting down? Wait, what's going to happen? All these questions that surfaced, not just within my own mind, but that of my teachers and the staff that I support, and then the students that I have the privilege of serving every day, and the parents who were coming into our office, like just swarming the office. The phones were off the chain that day. But as I think about it more deeply, as I'm hearing each of you speak, I really do think it surfaced from being on this my lifetime journey of typically being the only person of color working within a predominantly white staff, and really thinking about what is it going to take for me to maintain my ability to continue within education, and making sure that I don't leave, because I believe that I'm here to serve. And over the years, I've been able to cultivate that through just different acts of resilience that I've been able to develop my toolkit through different trainings and being around educators who I choose to surround myself with, people who bring smiles to my face, who make me laugh, who can recite Tupac and make connections, right? And this session is really focused on allowing teachers to begin surfacing or looking through what toolkit do they currently have, and why it's important to acknowledge just some of the different tools that you have already with you to be able to stay within the work that we're doing. Of course, the pandemic has required schooling to be reimagined in so many ways, from the administrative side to the teacher level to the way kids learn from home, right? And I started earlier by saying that I serve in Pico Union, which is a predominantly immigrant community, predominantly Spanish speaking. And so having to reimagine what it looks like in a community where the average income is less than $19,000 annually, we had a lot of questions, right? With that, though, we knew that there was power in our community because they've always been resilient, and we tapped into that. And so I started this journey of preparing my teachers to really think about what skill sets do you have that allowed you to remain resilient, and how are we going to continue to cultivate that during this time? Almost a year later, I'm really proud to say that we've retained all of our teachers. No one has quit. Every teacher showed up, I think for the most part, every day to work. We don't really have too many teachers that call out, which has allowed us to create a consistent school, which we know is what kids need. The consistency to know that someone's going to log in every day, provide love, compassion, and teaching, right? Or access to lessons. And that's really what this session is about, is just looking in and seeing what do I have that's going to allow me to continue in this work and continue to cultivate that commitment.
What is your current, what is your setup right now? Are you online at school? What's the makeup of your school right now?
Yeah, so I work at a charter school in Los Angeles. It's a public charter school. And people usually ask, well, what's the difference? There's no difference. We accept all kids from all backgrounds. Predominantly about a little bit over 50% of our scholars are English language learners. About 25% of our schools identify as students with an IEP. And we are currently working remotely. So we've been at home since March 12th. And it's been a great opportunity to just really see our kids rise to the occasion, and our teachers. Like, I have a firm quote that is that you lead with love so that teachers can teach from a place of love. And I believe that leaders, principals primarily, have the power to cultivate that within their teachers, to see them as practitioners and see them as people who can and are committed to this work. And a lot of that is, again, the way that we hold and see the teachers in the building first. And I try to cultivate that every day so that teachers feel empowered and are empowered to make those decisions they need to better serve our kids, in particular in a way that we've never had to serve before, right? Like, I don't think any of us here have ever served in a pandemic before. And so knowing that, it really takes a community effort to make sure that we're all serving kids at every capacity.
Nice. Anybody want to add? Any other questions, comments? I like the idea of, because you said early on about the importance of making sure that the teachers recognize their talents. I know in the past, in some previous positions I've had, we've gone through like Myers-Briggs. We've gone through some of those other personality type of things. Is that a strategy? Is that one of the ways that you help them figure out their talent? Like, what is kind of that process to help the teachers kind of recognize, their talents?
Yeah. So I'll share one of the practices that I hold deep to my heart, and that's the power of a circle. So a lot of the work that I do is just sitting in a communal space. When we were in person, is having a circle with no barriers and just being able to talk, share with me, who you were like when you were a child, what were your experiences like, what we talk about the school to prison pipeline. We talk about just unpacking bias, just different topics in the circle space. And now that we're virtual, we still continue to hold those circle talks, and we hold them at least 3 times a week, where different questions are posed to the group. And teachers just have the space to talk and share, and teaching our teachers on how to listen to each other helps breaks down some of that fear and that, I don't know, I think it just builds community in a way that allows everyone to be able to learn more about each other. And after doing that for several years, you start to see, again, you don't hurt people that you love and care for, right? You're able to have courageous conversations or vulnerable conversations with people because Aisha's not going to take offense to what I said because she's heard my story. She knows me. We've connected through the circle. And I've seen a lot of barriers kind of come down through the power of a circle. And that doesn't just work with kids, it works with adults as well. But it does take some transition time. I mean, there's a lot of fear, especially I work at a charter school. People leave all the time, come and go. I worked at a school where we had over 65% of the staff leave, year after year. And to be able to have retained all of our staff in the midst of a pandemic, I think that goes to the power of leading with compassion. And I think it starts with the principals, the people who have the power to influence and control or influence climate and culture within the school.
Nice. Well, I think it's time for us to, we think we can start wrapping things down a little bit. And I can't thank the panelists enough for joining us and sharing just so much golden nuggets tonight. It's awesome. Again, I told the folks when we first started this live session was like, I'm bringing on some more all-stars, and I definitely believe that everyone here delivered. So thank you again so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for your time. And I know, Brian, this is the wrap up, day 3, Sheldon. But as we said in the beginning, just because the summit ends doesn't mean the work ends. So push through, persist. I think David, used a great metaphor, as Homa pointed out. Be that unexpected thing that comes through the crack, that rose through the concrete jungle. Sometimes we have to find that within ourselves to push through, because other people may not validate and affirm that in us. But then we have to also make sure that we're doing that for our students. A lot of them are coming into our classrooms. They're broken. They've gone through experiences. And sometimes this is the only safe space where they hear a kind word, where they may have a popsy who believes in them. And then they're going to work for her, but they're working because they had the ability. But then she also knew how to cultivate that and pull it out of them. So persist, push through. We all know this life isn't easy. 2020 threw us all a curveball, but we made it here to 2021. Now we're just hoping 2021 to act a little right. It may have started off a little rocky, but regardless of what it throws at us, we're going to push through, because we have the alignment that Dr. Mejia spoke about. We're going to be coached up like Aisha is doing for the other teachers. And so, guys, just hang in there, hang strong, continue to find your tribe, your crew, like-minded people. Even if you feel like you're the singleton in your building, there are others out there. It's just a matter of connecting and finding those spaces, like Kevin said. If you don't see them, then create those affinity groups. So that way we can get this work done, because we know it's messy work, it's dirty work, it's hard work, but we got this, y'all. We got this, and there are young people that are counting on us. So we got to carry through.
And there's still time to catch the sessions from today. They have until 7 a.m. Is that right? So you can still register. Right. If you haven't seen day 1 or day 2, you can at least catch day 3. However, if you want all access pass, there's a way that you can actually get that. So you want to make sure that you go to the leadingequitycenter.com and actually look for the information in regards to getting you an all access pass. You can get that done for a single user and a multi-user pass as well. However, we may be giving away some of those access pass, right?
Let's do it. Let's give some more away. Let's give some more out. So, help me out with the rule, because I keep messing. It seems like every night I mess it up.
It's day 3. Really, technically day 4. I don't care what the rules are, man. Whatever you want to do.
Okay. I mess them up every night. I mean, bottom line is, if you can provide a substantive tweet using the hashtag Leading Equity Summit on something that you learned from tonight's session, first 3 people that do it within the next hour will get 3 passes. I've given them out and earlier this week and even today, and folks are just very thankful for this opportunity, and they're having a chance to go through it. One of the challenges, we're at school. And so a lot of us are working. It's like, I tried to catch as many as I could. There was 20 sessions today. And so I just kind of had to pick and choose. So just kind of grabbing that all access pass has been very helpful for a lot of people, and just to being able to have that and continue on with the PD and get those PD certificates. So you can still register for free now. But again, if you send me just, hashtag Leading Equity Summit, something that you learned from tonight, substantive from tonight. It could be something that somebody said or whatever it is, and get you a pass. 3 passes. Well, I will give out 3 passes.
You're not gonna get 3 for yourself.
Yeah. Let me make sure. Don't be trying to. Yeah. So I will give out 3 passes off of that.
Can't be hoarding no access passes. Yeah. You take 1. Well, we want to once again thank you, Dr. Eakins, for being obedient and putting this on. This is year 2, and I know doing something like this can be a little challenging, a little scary. But seriously, understanding the vision, writing it down, and then putting feet to it is worth giving you some props on, brother. And
Thank
we're
you.
always here to support you, and we appreciate you allowing Past the Scope EDU, Valerie, and myself to continue to amplify what it is that you're doing. For those that don't know, that's what we do here at Past the Scope EDU. Your story, your passions, your voice, we're here to amplify that so we can ignite a passion for learning one step at a time. One scope at a time. I told y'all I'm tired. Any parting shots before we leave? Valerie? Any parting shots before we leave?
No shouts from me. Just stay safe, stay healthy, everyone, and keep up the good fight. Get into some good trouble.
Oh, yeah. Get in some good trouble. Always. All right. We love you guys. We'll catch you on the next event with Past the Scope EDU. Be safe. Stay safe. See y'all
Thank
later.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so